Hi, I'm Natalie, and welcome back to Sacred in Bloom. I create content to empower and uplift women, help them heal their nervous systems and relationships with themselves and others, and deepen their intuition, self-love, joy, and sense of purpose. If you found me through one of my guided meditations, you should know that I also share other types of content like this, because on my own journey, it took more than meditations to move through where I was. If you are called to my meditations or I just popped up randomly in your feed, we are probably vibing. So I welcome you to stay a while and see if any of this speaks to you. Many of you, myself included, are in a period of discomfort, this weird in-between where you're waiting for something to happen or be revealed, or maybe you feel like you're in the process of becoming and you don't feel like your old self, but you don't feel quite like your evolved self either. I did a couple of videos about this and I'll link them in the description for you below. But what I want to talk about today is how that is showing up in your relationships and how your relationships become mirrors and tools for seeing where we are and where we're going. When we're in liminal spaces, weird things can start happening with our relationships, existing friendships, romantic partners, family relationships, stuff with your boss, all over the place. Things can start to feel weird. Like when you've gained some weight and your clothing starts to feel a little too tight, or maybe you've lost some and it makes you feel frumpy. When we're in the in-between, it can be hard to decide what to do about that feeling. The other thing that happens is that whether we mean to or not, when we are shifting into a new version of ourselves, what I'd like to call, if I'm not being too woo-woo, when we start shifting into a higher frequency, we start calling in new people, new friends, new clients, new love, whatever it is. They feel like when you open up a stuffy room and a fresh breeze blows in. They may challenge you or tempt you, disarm you, even alarm you in some way. When we're at a growth point, we sometimes get these new energies coming in to show us what's possible or to provide contrast, or sometimes I believe as a gift for all the work we've done on ourselves. There are 1,000 reasons, but they come in as a mirror. What you're attracting, the people and relationships that drop in your lap, are showing you either where you are or what's next. This can feel really great, or it can be really uncomfortable, sometimes a bit of both. Because when I say a relationship is a mirror, I mean that a person who is giving you inconsistent energy, for example, may be showing you where you have abandonment wounds. Or a person who is consistent can be showing you where you don't trust stability. If you're attracting a person with a ton of issues and you feel like you need to save them, that can mean a few things. In my experience, it meant I was outsourcing my worth, avoiding my own growth by feeling like I was someone else's savior. And, that comes from a good place, right? We're told to help other people, especially women. We're programmed to put others' needs first and serve. And the problem is if you keep finding yourself in relationships where you overfunction and overgive and you aren't expressing your needs to the point of exhaustion. Sorry, I had a candle and it just went out. So I was saying, if you are overextending, you're exhausted because you are overgiving, right? Even if you're doing that from a place of feeling like you're being a good person, if it is taking you to the point of exhaustion or you aren't getting your own needs met, like if you are finding that there is imbalance in the relationship, that is a very strong indicator that you have work to do on your sense of self-worth, on how, and also on how you're sourcing your own sense of safety. It's also a flashing neon sign that you have room to improve your boundaries. There are lots of people who can teach us that one, right? For example, I have a dear friend who had a terribly narcissistic boss who was constantly inappropriate, unprofessional, and disrespectful of her time and honestly of her in general. And through that relationship, she started to learn that she needed to firm up her boundaries, and she started gaining a more sense of her self-worth. And finally, she quit that job. But the experience led her to recognizing that her husband at the time was a narcissist too, and that she was playing out a similar dynamic in that relationship. Eventually, she divorced him. But people don't have to be toxic to show us where we have room to love ourselves. Sometimes people come in and love us in a way that reveals all the ways that we don't let love in. Their attunement shows us how uncomfortable we are with being seen. So that might feel less like doing it the hard way than being with someone who blows past our boundaries or mistreats us in a way that helps us find our inner strength and self-belief. But sometimes when the universe comes in soft, we don't know what to do with that. Our old tricks don't work, which is exactly why the universe brings the mirror in differently, so that we have to approach it from a different angle. And we have choices when these mirrors happen, right? When these people show up, whether they come in soft to heal our old, tender, deep places, or they come in with chaos, codependence, or toxicity to strengthen us and teach us about ourselves. We get to decide how much work we want to do, or if we want to do it at all. But the work that you don't do with that person becomes work that you're going to do maybe in a harder way with someone else later. And so many of us get sucked into our patterns right away, and we run or we blame or we hate people for the ways that they've treated us. And we miss the opportunity to look at the impact that they have had and try to find what the universe is trying to tell us about where we aren't loving ourselves. So if you think about some of the most difficult relationships in your life, what sticks out to you? I'm willing to bet that they fundamentally changed you. They taught you something about yourself that completely changed how you show up in the world, probably in a permanent way. But how they change you depends on how you managed the lesson that they brought. Here's a personal example. When I was in my very early 20s, I was in a 4-year relationship with a narcissist. I have very high empathy, and if you do too, you know that we often are targeted by narcissists. We have so much to give, and they have an insatiable need to take, to be validated, to be adored, to be centered by someone. And without getting into too much detail, the best way I can describe this relationship for me is that he absolutely shattered me. At the end of the relationship, I felt like a dropped mirror, and I had to sort through all of these broken pieces of myself. I had to cut my fingers trying to find what was actually me and what was who he tried to make me into. And I could have hated him for that, but I never did. I was broken down in a way that gave me a unique opportunity for intense introspection. I also started to learn about what I deserve, and I could have closed my heart then, because I certainly felt tremendous pain, but I didn't. He fundamentally changed me, not in a way that made me cold, bitter, or closed. Why? Because that isn't who I wanted to be. And I'm telling you this to extend an invitation to you to look at your relationships, past and present, and examine how they have been or are being a mirror, showing you something about yourself. What did you learn, and what did you do about what you learned? Did you grow, or did you just attract the same lesson in a new package? I would encourage you to look at the people in your past or even in your present as teachers, even if they triggered you, especially if they triggered you, even if they hurt you, even if they effed you over. And if you're in a relationship, whether it's a job, a friendship, a marriage, or whatever, and you're being triggered in a way that pains you, what is the lesson you're struggling to learn? When you learn it, you'll be able to release the relationship. You will stop attracting the same dynamic over and over. If you are triggered by someone being good to you, and that may sound weird if you don't have that wound, but it's a real thing, I promise. If you're triggered by love, by softness, by kindness, by someone finally being interested in your needs, what is the lesson the universe is trying to teach you about love? What are you being invited to let yourself be worthy of, just as you are, right where you are, imperfect and messy? Ultimately, the mirrors we call in are largely about love, about self-love. They show us where we're strong, where we need to slow down, where we don't have to be perfect. They teach us how to speak our truth, how to overcome our fears. They show us the old armor that keeps us from feeling, the walls we've created that were built to protect us, but end up keeping out love and light and joy. They teach us how important it can be to stand on our own 2 feet, and then around the next bend, someone else teaches us the tremendous value of partnership and letting other people help us. So what I've been doing when I do these videos is I pull a couple of cards, because I have been reading cards since, for over 30 years. And I like to pull them at the end, just as I will say, to give the universe a chance to throw their 2 cents in. And I went ahead and pulled them off camera before I started, just to save time so you don't have to watch me shuffle. If you're interested, the deck I'm using, the first one I pulled from, is the Between Worlds Oracle. And it's so interesting because the card that I pulled first is Surrender. And at the start of the video, I mentioned that the last couple of videos I've been doing are literally about surrender. And so I appreciate the universe giving me a little nod here about how the idea of surrender applies in our relationships also. And that can mean surrendering to whatever the lesson is, whether it's something keeping you in a relationship that you've outgrown, whether it's something keeping you from embracing something new that's coming in, whether it is surrendering to letting yourself be loved or loving yourself in a new way. There are all of these stories we hold on to about who we are and what we deserve. And I would encourage you to look at those stories and decide which ones are serving you and which ones are not, and decide what you can start to release, even if it's just a little bit at a time. And what parts of yourself are hanging on to the things that no longer serve you just because they're comfortable or known. Surrender can be tough, but it's often, I think, where our growth is, in that discomfort. Interestingly, I pulled from a couple of decks, and I'm going to go a little bit out of order here just because of the way that these came out. But I also pulled from the Herbal Astrology Oracle, which is one of my favorites. The art is beautiful. The book is great. And I also pulled Surrender again from that deck. And so I wanted to, where did I put it? Oh. I wanted to go ahead and talk about what it says in the book because the book is great. But this card has to do with sacrifice, surrender, choosing growth, trusting discernment, and participating in rituals of letting go. Passion flower symbolizes surrender, sacrifice, and the crucifixion of the ego. Passion flower resembles the need to sacrifice in order to make space and move forward. The all-seeing double-headed owl symbolizes the great understanding perceived from both sides, whether it be upside down or inside out, and bestows goddess passion flower with unseen truths as she performs rituals for letting go. Owl is symbolic of discernment and able to light up what needs to be seen. Passion flower today might reflect the need to suspend actions that aren't aligned in your spiritual path. Are there certain decisions or actions you've made that you must sacrifice in order to reassess your direction? Honor your intuition. It's okay if projects or original ideas come to an unexpected halt. Discernment is key to experience greater truth and opportunities. What I like about this in the context of what we're speaking about is that sometimes I think we get to a place in relationships where we learn the lesson. We realize where we're overfunctioning. We realize that the way that we have been showing up is not serving us, and most of the time also not serving our partner. And sometimes we can change within that if the other person is also willing to, is on a growth journey of their own and you're kind of evolving in tandem. But that doesn't always happen. And it takes some discernment, right, to know when to surrender. And sometimes letting go can be the best thing. And sometimes we have more lessons. We have more things that we can learn from someone, right? So I love that those two both came up. And I was only going to do one, and I decided to do a second one and got Damania, which is the beloved. And this one is about magnetism, attraction, kindred spirits, soulmates, relationships, which is what we're talking about, intimacy, sacred play, and finding the beloved within. Damania represents the universal principle of the beloved within relationships and within ourselves. The alchemy of polarity is what we are made of, and this integration of opposites is that which births the beloved. This card represents the journey of coming together and reuniting within oneself, a lover, friend, family member, or any important person in your life. You are in an important period of making choices and establishing healthy boundaries, especially with those you'd like to deepen and expand, or those you feel the need to shed or distance yourself from. So again, the discernment. Damania reminds us of the importance of shaking off rigidity that often depletes creative reserves and sacred play. I love that phrase, sacred play. If you feel unsatisfied or emotionally unavailable, even to those whom you love, take the time to be in solitude and nourish your creative centers. Often separation becomes the basis to reunite once again in a higher frequency. True self-love is the key to lasting relationships with others, and most importantly, with yourself. So, I said earlier that when we have people come in as mirrors, really what they're doing is giving us an opportunity to find all of the places where we're struggling to love ourselves, all of the places where we're struggling to speak our needs, or to be fully in our power, or to allow ourselves to receive, right? There are so many ways that we end up in these dynamics with other people that demonstrate to us all of the places where we're not loving ourselves, when we're trying to do all of these things and show up in all of these unhealthy ways to be loved. It's often because we're not being love. We're not loving ourselves. And this is highlighted for us when we can get really honest about how we're showing up and what we're attracting and repelling in relationships. I also pulled from the Animal Spirit, the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit deck. And I lost my place, so let me find it again. But something I thought was so interesting is that I pulled the fox. And this is about being a healthy partner. It's also about being a wise teacher. And so I love that this is what I pulled, because it's really about how there are things, there's work that we can do on ourselves in isolation. There are things I think that sometimes we need to be in isolation to learn about ourselves. However, there are also things that we can only learn about ourselves. There's growth that can only happen when we allow ourselves to be in relationship, when we allow ourselves to come into conscious partnership and let ourselves be vulnerable with somebody, and let our wounds be seen so that they can be tended. And so I think sometimes people get into this place of, and we hear this bullshit, right? Like that you can't be loved until you love yourself. And I mean, I think there is some truth to that, only because if you're not loving yourself, you're having a hard time receiving love. If you're not loving yourself, there is no amount of loving you that someone else can do that's going to make you feel loved. You have to release your shame and plug that hole. In my own experience, shame is like a hole in a bucket. And so there can be one person that has the shame, and then there can be another person that's pouring into this person, trying to take care of them and love them. And again, this is like where the overfunctioning can happen, right? But we're pouring into this person. But if they're full of shame, it's like a hole in the bucket, and the love just goes through. It doesn't actually get fully received. But that is something that you don't realize you have that hole, maybe, until you're in partnership. Or you don't realize that you are abandoning yourself still until you get in relationship and you're overgiving to the point of abandoning your own needs. There are things that we learn in relationship that we cannot learn on our own. And the last card that I pulled is from the Divine Feminine Oracle, which is another one that I love. And the one that I got was the White Buffalo Calf Woman, the prophetess of the sacred way. She says, "My heart is a compass. The path of love is true abundance." And before I look at the book, if you are struggling to create abundance in your life, if you're struggling to create financial abundance, if you're struggling to creatively in your life, if you're feeling stuck, look at where you are not letting love in. Because they are tied together. That if you know anything about astrology, that's Venus energy. Venus energy has to do with our abundance, but also with our creativity. That it's all tied together. And so if you are denying love, even self-love, you are not going to be able to call in the things that you are trying to call in. So the question in here for her is, what is my intention for the work I'm currently doing? So again, it's your relationship with love and your ability to love yourself and to let love in has a lot to do with being able to receive any kind of abundance in your life. White Buffalo Calf Woman is a sacred reminder that we don't have to struggle to receive all that we've desired. When we join our heart's longing with action, we find that there is a sacred way to move through the world. This sacred way is a path of steady, quiet alignment between the heart's intention and our every step. White Buffalo Calf Woman is an omen of hope that all will be provided for us when we approach each situation with love. What she wants us to focus on is the intention behind an action, because that changes the outcome. She is a sacred prophetic sign that we can receive what we need without fighting for it or trying to secure it through manipulation. When prayer joins right action, when we move from that intention of creating only more love, then abundance is inevitable. And when we seek not just for ourselves, but also for the benefit of our loved ones and community, our needs are divinely met. The most sacred path is the one abundant with love. I hope that this was helpful. If you're listening to this and you've gotten this far and you haven't watched my video on surrender or on navigating liminal spaces and staying open when you don't have all the answers, I think is that what that one's called. I would encourage you to go listen to those. If you're in this kind of liminal space, or you're in a place where you're evaluating relationships or seeing things come up, I would encourage you to stick with that and really take the time to look at what is being shown to you. There's an opportunity for you to grow and expand through that reflection. Thank you for being here if you made it this far, and please like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps my channel. I would love for you to comment anything about something that resonated with you, or what came up for you. And I just want you to know that you're not alone, and I'm wishing you so much love and joy and abundance in your life. So again, thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.